Do you struggle with editing? Over the last few videos, some of you have left comments talking about how you feel like you're paralyzed during the editing process and either you don't know where to start, where to go, or where to stop. So in this video series, I'm going to talk about my process that I've perfected over the last 50 books that will help you get through editing with no problem at all. What's up, guys? Michael Laurent here with Author Level Up, helping you master the craft of writing. And in this video series, we're talking about editing because I've been hearing from some of you about the editing process, particularly self-editing, and how big and daunting it feels. And so I wanted to tackle this over a series of videos. And as you guys know, I've written over 50 books, and I've kind of got editing and book production down to a science. And I've made a lot of mistakes. And so I want to share some of those with you, as well as a process that I follow to make sure that I'm creating a high quality story every time. Now, here's the thing about editing. With editing, there's a lot of emotions in the editing process, particularly if it's your first book. What I want you to understand is that editing is just a series of steps. It's a series of logical steps. If you take the emotions out and focus on following the steps, that's going to help you get through it much faster. If you know what the steps are ahead of time, it's also going to help you flow through them faster. Now, here's the thing, if this is your first book, because this is also important. If this is your first book, you have no baseline. This is all new. You don't have the baseline, so it's going to feel like you're aloft in the middle of the sea. But just know that the goal, my goal with this video series is to help you get through the process as quickly and with as high quality as possible so that you can develop a baseline, so that you can get your book out there to paying readers, find out what they say, because their opinion is the only opinion that matters. Okay? Once you figure out what they have to say, then that's going to give you a lot of data and a lot of insights into how well you're editing, and then you can start to look at each of these phases that I'm going to talk about, and then you can start to tweak them and improve the quality of your stories over time. So I'll put a graphic up on the screen here. You guys like when I break things down into silly phases. So what I like to think about the editing process is like progressing through life. So like your edits start at childhood and they go all the way up to old age. So in the childhood phase, step one is what I call an alpha reader or first reader. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Step two is the developmental editing process. I don't recommend that. We're not going to talk about that in this series. You guys know my reasons for that. Then you move into what's called the adolescence phase, which is the self-editing process, which is where a lot of people get paralyzed. All right, this is the gigantic ocean that you have to cross. Okay, once you cross that ocean, that's when the edits start to become more mature. And that's when you move into the adult phase. Step four is a unique step that I follow. You're probably not going to hear other people talk about this, but it's called fact-checking. All right. Step five is beta reading, should you choose to do that. And then step six is another type of unique editing that I've started doing lately called continuity editing. This is not developmental editing. And then you move into the old age. Your manuscript becomes a senior citizen. All right. And then we move into copy editing and proofreading. So let's just hit the childhood phase real quick because there's not much to talk about it as it pertains to me. Okay. So the first step in the editing process is if you choose to do it. You don't have to do all of these steps, but if you were to choose to do it, would be an alpha reader. Now, an alpha reader is someone who reads your book once it is done. They are the first person to read it. The book hasn't been edited. You have done nothing. It is still hot off the press. And an alpha reader, also known as a first reader, will take a look at it and give you their opinion. Now, naturally, this needs to be someone whose opinion you can trust. You don't want to just give it to Joe Blow off the street. They're going to read the book, tell you what they think about it, and an ideal alpha reader is probably not going to tell you to rewrite anything or scrap anything. They're just going to tell you what their gut reactions are. Okay, it just gives you a good gut feeling on, hey, do I got something here? What do I potentially need to work on? What do I need to think about? All right. Step two is the developmental editing, but you guys know I don't recommend developmental editing. I don't do it myself. I have an entire video on why that is. But if you choose to do that, this is where that would fall. And then we move into adolescence, which is, like I said, an ocean. This is the biggest part of the editing process. It's the part where a lot of people just drown. All right. So I'm going to help you through it. I'm going to make sure you get through it. But we got to set the table on this. All right. So when you move into self-editing, particularly if you've never done it before, as I said earlier, there are a lot of emotions in the process. Let's talk about them. First, you're going to be feeling fear because you've never done this before and it's scary. Second, you're going to be feeling that urge to have perfectionism because you want things to meet your standards. But as I said before, you don't have any standards because you don't have a baseline if it's your first book. All right. Third thing you have to be aware of is self-doubt because, like I said, you've never been through the process before and it can feel scary. You're going to doubt yourself. All right. And then there's another thing you have to think about, which is more practical, which is your mood levels and your energy levels. Because as you're editing, you're going to go through peaks and valleys. You know, if you're editing at 7 o'clock in the morning, you're going to have a completely different mindset than if you're editing at midnight. And if you're like most people, you're probably going to be editing throughout the period of a day or maybe, several days. And so your energy levels and your mood levels and your inspiration levels are going to be different throughout the entire process. And so you have to learn to manage that and expect that you're going to get those peaks and valleys. I like to call it the emotional editing roller coaster. So understand that it's normal so that you can plan for it. Now remember, take all of that and set it aside. Let the steps be your North Star. You have one goal during this phase. One goal, that's it. I hope that this goal serves you well. That goal is to keep things moving, momentum and progress every single day. Now, you don't want to go too fast. You don't want to go too slow. It's kind of like the cruise control on your car. You hit the cruise control and you're just going at a nice steady pace. There's like this street in my city where if you go 11 miles an hour, you can hit all of the green lights. Like you won't get stopped at any red light. It's kind of like that. You want to hit all the green lights and just cruise, okay? So here's how you do that. If you are looking at your manuscript and you're trying to figure out, oh my God, where do I start? Because, think about it. You got story, you got grammar, you got character. There's all sorts of things you can look at, right? Dialogue. Here's what I do, all right? And I go through this at a pretty brisk pace. I break the self-editing process into 3 steps. The first step is story edits. Second step is spelling and grammar edits. And then the third step is what I like to call the last line of defense. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, with the story pass, this is what you do, okay? You start, what I prefer to do, and this is just my opinion, I look at everything in the story. So I will start and go through and look at, okay, is everything making sense from a story perspective? Are there any plot holes? Is there any consistency issues? Do I have a character's eyes that are green on page 7 and purple on page 20? Things like that. Look at the story from a big picture level. You're going to catch some spelling and grammar errors, and there's nothing wrong with correcting those as you go. But I like to think about it like this. 80% of the edits that I make during this step are story related. 20% of the edits are probably spelling and grammar related, usually coming out of a story issue. And so what I'll do is I'll start with the first chapter, and then I'll do the last chapter, and then I'll do chapter 2, and then I'll do the second to last chapter, and then I'll do chapter 3, and then I'll do the third to last chapter. And the reason I like to do this is because sometimes you have a different idea of what the story is at the beginning of the book than what it ultimately ends up becoming, and you get these weird mismatches. So if you start in the beginning and at the end, in the beginning at the end, you catch stuff like that a lot easier. It jumps out at you because then you'll write a chapter with the villain that's like chapter 3, and then chapter 45 also has the villain, and then I missed something I forgot that he did this and that, and then you can start correcting stuff. That's how I do it. Now, when do you stop? Here's the guide rail, and it's actually quite simple. You stop once you've made your way through the entire book. It's that simple. As I said, remember the cruising speed. All right, you're going at a brisk pace through everything. You make sure you stop. Okay, and if you struggle with that, set a timer or a deadline. that, it's going to take you 2 weeks to get through the story edit or whatever that looks like for you, okay? That's when you know when to stop. Don't rely on your emotions during self-editing. Editing is not about emotions. Editing is about the accuracy of your story. If you fall into the emotional trap, you'll get stuck, okay? Focus on getting through, okay? Now, the second phase is spelling and editing errors, okay? So this is pretty straightforward. You're gonna look at spelling and grammar errors, sentence restructuring in some cases, paragraphing, all that good stuff that you think about when you think about editing. And what I like to think about this particular section is 80% of my edits are probably going to be spelling and grammar related. I might catch 20% other things. I might catch some formatting errors. I might catch some additional story errors that I missed, all right? But I'm focused primarily on spelling and grammar. And if you want to break this down even further, another tip is that when you look at an individual chapter, edit items in isolation. So I have a book, it's called How to Write Your First Novel. I'll throw it up on the screen here. And in that book, I break every piece of text into 3 sections: dialogue, narrative, and action. So just if you wanted to, you could do mini sweeps. First, look at all your dialogue. All right, look at all your dialogue, and then when you're looking at all your dialogue together, you see things with your dialogue that you wouldn't see as if you were just going straight through line by line. Then look at all your narrative. Then look at all your action. Okay, you can go overboard with this, but you can use Scrivener has a great feature called Linguistic Focus that can help you with this. For those of you who use Scrivener for Mac, watch my Scrivener videos. You'll see what I'm talking about, or just Google Linguistic Focus. It's a phenomenal tool for helping you with this. All right, so that's the spelling and grammar pass. Now, when are you done with the spelling and grammar pass? Well, you're done when you get through the book. And here's another pro tip. I don't recommend you start this phase front to back. When you do front to back, your eyes kind of glaze over. I almost never recommend front to back editing until the end. So what I do is I start at the end of the book if I'm doing a spelling and grammar pass, and then I work my way backward because it keeps your brain alert and it makes you, there's something about it just makes your brain do jumping jacks. It's a lot harder to get tired, and you tend to look for stuff and you catch stuff a lot better when you do things out of sequence. Now at this point, this is where I start getting questions. Well, Michael, what about people who do multiple drafts? Where I like to do, a draft, and then maybe I write my book in 8 drafts. All right. Well, I can't help you in that case. Here's the thing. Okay. At the end of the day, it's about the reader. It's not about you or your personal best, especially if it's your first book, because readers are the only people that decide the quality of the story. I know that sounds weird, but it's absolutely true. And like I said, I've been doing this for over 50 books. Sometimes the books that I thought weren't that good ended up being hits with readers. Sometimes it was the other way around, but I didn't know until I published the book. So I stopped letting myself or an editor or anyone, for that matter, be an arbiter of the quality of my stories. If you want to write multiple drafts, cool. I got no problem personally with that. If that's the way you operate, that's the way you operate. Just remember that there is a law called diminishing returns, and you can spend 100 drafts on a book. It's not necessarily going to make it better. So just keep that in mind and set yourself a deadline if you're going to do that. And then another question comes up on rewriting. Well, what about the people that like to rewrite their books? Again, I believe that readers are the best judges of your work. Not you, not an editor, not even a beta reader, but actual paying readers. And you have no way of knowing if rewriting a chapter is going to make it better, objectively. Okay. Now, if there's spelling and grammar errors, or if there's issues with structure, or you struggle with, basic sentence construction, that's a different story. But I imagine that many of you don't fall into that category. So again, we're looking at objectivity as much as we can. And you have no way of knowing if a rewrite is actually going to make your story better or worse. So I am of the camp of let paying readers give you the data, look at the data, and then you can make a decision. But in order to do that, you've got to get your first book out the door. All right, so you finished your spelling and grammar pass. you are ready. Now what do you do? Well, now you can do what I like to call the last line of defense. So, my friends that use Microsoft Word, yes, Word spell checker, it's going to help you catch a few. Every one you catch is good because you don't want readers to catch it. But then there's also Pro Writing Aid and Grammarly. I used to believe that you would use one or the other. Lately, though, I've been finding that they actually complement each other quite well. So check out my comparison video on Pro Writing Aid and Grammarly. They're both great in their own right. I recommend them both. But I find that Grammarly can catch some errors a lot better than Pro Writing Aid can, and vice versa. All right, so if you had the time in a perfect world, you would run your book through Pro Writing Aid, and then you would run it through Grammarly. All right, now you can go kind of overboard here, but what I would do, and this is the process that I'm following, is I run it through Word spell checker, then I run it through Pro Writing Aid and Grammarly, and I run it through both of them, and I just see what happens, right? Because remember, every edit you catch is an edit that, or a typo that, a reader or your editor is not going to catch. And then the last line of defense that I've been doing lately, I've just put this into deployment with my most recent books, is using Microsoft Word macros to help you catch additional errors that Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid can't catch. Don't fall asleep on me. I know Microsoft Word macros is kind of a sleepy topic, but there's a gentleman by the name of Paul Beverly that has a lot of free materials to help you with your editing with this. So I'm going to drop a link to it, and just know that I'm going to be talking a lot more about this on the channel as we move forward. I'm going to do a dedicated video on how you can set all this up yourself for free. But suffice to say, I have a workflow that basically helped me catch about 100 edits that my editors have caught in the past before I sent the work to my editors. All right, so anything you can do at this point to reduce the amount of edits with your last line of defense is a pretty big deal and a pretty important thing. So once you get to this point, congratulations, you've made it through the self-edit phase. Now, what a lot of people will do is just send their book to an editor, okay? I've found, and some mistakes that I've made that I'm gonna share with you in the next few videos, is there's another layer before the book goes to the editor. And we're gonna talk about fact checkers, and we're gonna talk about beta readers in the next video. See you there.